Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are excited that our next session, which is called News from Nowhere, Eclipse, hosted by Postec, will actually invite fascinating artists. This session will be moderated by Associate Professor Jong-Ah Woo, and we are very happy that this session will be held in Korean. So please welcome with me Professor Jong-Ah Woo to the stage.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank the organizers of this GEEF 2023 for giving me such an honorable opportunity to take a part of this wonderful gathering. 보다 나은 미래를 고민하는.
So the keyword of the forum is to think about a better future. The first modern art project that came to my mind is News from Nowhere, which was created by duet Moon Kyung-won and Chun Jun-ho. These two artists who are questioning the social functions of art began to work together back in 2012 at Kassel Documenta after they presented News from Nowhere. News from Nowhere is a book that was written by an English artist and businessman, publisher, a novelist, a poet, and socialist William Morris. This is perceived as a predecessor of the narrative Utopia. The protagonist, William, actually dreams after having gone to the Socialist League and actually experiences a distant future in 2050. UK in 2050 has already gone through fearless revolution with the abolition of the private properties and class stratification, and also a large capital plant and industries have vanished. And of course, by 2050, I will no longer have a job. And the government, the state and schools have disappeared as well. People here are free and equal and fair. They're prospering together with the neighbors and producing products to the minimum extent needed. And he was a very successful businessman after the Industrial Revolution, but came to realize structural contradictions of capitalism. To him, utopia was based on critical recognition of reality and nostalgia for the medieval times, and this is indeed a good place that exists nowhere. It was also based on radical socialism as well. And also, News from Nowhere from the 21st century focuses on looking at global problems acutely and also to imagine possible futures together with neighbors. It's about making this work together, the deliverables of which are presented in the form of exhibition, publications, video and images, and represent a dialogue as well as compromise and partnerships. Today, we're going to be presenting to you a video that was shown at Seoul Weather Station back in 2022 at Art Sunjae. We'll be looking at the Eclipse film together. Prior to that, Chun Jun-ho is going to be briefly introducing Eclipse, and we will be inviting Professor Kim Dae-sik from KAIS to have a conversation afterwards. And I guess we're all working together in partnership with the artists at this time.
The title of the first artwork for this project is En Fil del Mundo, or The End of the World. It is the beginning, but ironically talks about the end. Actors Lee Jung-jae and Im Soo-jung show two completely separate worlds through each of the dual screen. At the end of the 19th century, William Morris stated that a green utopia can be achieved by defeating structural issues of society, such as state and capitalism and social hierarchy, through political revolution. Yet, in early 21st century, Moon Kyung-won and Chun Jun-ho faced issues that threatened the system itself, which are very human-sized, called society, such as mass destruction, war, climate crisis, ecosystem destruction, and environmental matters. Therefore, they do not present a rosy future of harmonious society after their revolution. Rather, they imagine a clean room in which the lone pale survivor rely on machines for his or her life, living somewhere in a desert-like place after the end of civilization and the collapse of Mother Nature. In 2021, the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art of Korea presented News from Nowhere, Freedom Village, and the actors Park Jung-min and Shin Young uses a dual screen back-to-back and living in a dual world. However, these dual worlds, whether they coexist or whether they are a cause and result, or is it a fiction and fact, or is it utopia and dystopia? It's very unclear whether there is this distinction. However, the two worlds are connected by seeds that create very fine cracks between the two worlds, and that could be art. So they are useless and fragile, but beautiful and poetic. Moon Kyung-won and Chun Jun-ho uses biotechnology and AI to imagine the future. They collaborate with scientists, and they also work with textile and architect designers to take a look at the space and environment. They also work with sound designers to create an immersive environment, and they also work with writers and philosophers to take a look at ethics and attitudes. So it's a mobile agora. So they don't have a rosy picture of the future, but as we are here today, the solidarity of fragile beings like ourselves is very powerful. We will now invite Chun Jun-ho to the stage.
Hello. As was introduced, I am Chun Jun-ho. It's great to meet you today. So Professor Wu gave us a very accurate introduction of this project called News from Nowhere. We've been engaged in this project for 12 years now. There's a reason as to why we decided to plan this project. And as an artist myself, and also I wanted to look at the role and function of art in the society that we live in, had a lot of questions and also skepticism that gave a fertile ground to beginning this project. So we wanted to go beyond the boundaries of art, wanted to understand how people are perceiving art. Is art useful at all? And in the future, will art continue to exist? And I had a lot of question marks in my mind when I began to embark on this project and wanted to go beyond having this discourse and to understand and to create some products and artworks from these ideas and perspectives. I worked with architects after the doomsday. And if there are any limited number of survivors on Earth, and to create perhaps a house or to create an equipment that gives water, and what will they be wearing? What will they be listening to? How will they be entertaining themselves? These are the thoughts that drove the implementation of the project thus far. And one of the artworks that we'll be showing you, it's a single channel video film that we will be showing you. In 2011, Kanazawa 21st Century Exhibition commissioned this work. And there's this actor who is surviving in a vast wide ocean and on a boat and has to battle for his life every single day. And the environment around was actually a made-up world. It was just an artificial world, as the person came to realize. And together with Professor Kim, we'll think about awareness, perception in real verse and metaverse. Where are we living in? Is there a combination of both? What are our perceptions? What are our awareness? What about our future? As I mentioned before, is our future really sustainable? That's the type of discourse that I want to engage you with. Thank you very much.
So let us start our dialogue. First, let me give our artist a question. So let's start from News from Nowhere by William Morris. So the novel itself talks about the real world and the fictional world that he dreams of. And so there's a clear-cut separation. But the News from Nowhere that you have created is a dual screen. So we see both worlds at the same time. While we're looking at this, we're not really sure what is fictional and what is not. And we're not really sure which is better than the other. But if we take a look at Eclipse, it's not a dual screen, it's a single screen. And looking at it, we're not really sure if it's fictional or if it's factual. And so we continued to ask this question, is it fictional or factual? So you usually use dual screen, but this was a single screen, but we're not really sure which side it's on. So what is the meaning behind that? So I think rather than thinking about the number of the screens, what you just saw is Eclipse, and as Professor Oh has mentioned, it's actually a mixture of fictional and factual world, and so it actually shows the distortion of our perception of reality from our memory. Some people interpret this to be how continents will be flooded and underwater because of global warming, and you may think that this is showing the end of the world because of global warming. But why did we create this video? If I may answer that question, well, in the previous session and during this session, we're continuing to talk about our sustainable future. And concerning sustainable future, we continue to question whether a sustainable future is possible. I believe that that's not possible. We need to give up on this under this trust. There's no sustainable world. It's about adapting to changes. So that's what I believe we need to do. Well, we are actually very spiritual fortune tellers. Everyone seems to know what the future will hold. In 2050, climate change will create global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius, and of course, we have these factual analytics, but it seems that we are neglecting what will happen in 2050, thinking that it will be rosier than it actually will be. And so what we need to do is accept the reality and respond to it. And I think that's what I would like to discuss. And as the starting point of this conversation, I hope that this video will give you a hint of how to start that conversation. So concerning that question, I think Professor Kim is much more equipped to talk about this topic.
So to begin, your film was very interesting. So we're looking at the images at the background. If you, towards the end of the film, we see the wireframe. Of course, we have a creator over here, but of course there's that hint that is shown at the end of the film to tell the audience that nothing is real here. Of course, from a certain point of view, of course the film was produced in 2022, but now it's 2023. A person from the 21st century, whether the sustainable future itself is possible. So we can perhaps interpret this as you trying to show the world that can be sustainable in the future. Or on the other side of this, we may think that the world as we know has already disappeared, vanished from the face of the earth. And in 30 years, for example, our posterity may look back and to try to do some research into history as to understand why the world that people knew has disappeared. We have done it in early 21st century. For example, if you look at the game called Civilization, we look at politics, economics, and we look at different fields to understand why something happened in the past that led to the current status. So this is really not the future that we have envisioned, but this is actually people from the future who are trying to do a simulation as to what happened in the past to understand the current state of the planet.
So if we take a look at this artwork, because you are artists and at the same time you enjoy working with collaborating with scientists, and so you see this robotics, it looks like a dog, is it? And it's actually collecting carbon. So we see the development of science and technology, and the impact of human becomes larger on Earth, and that makes us predict a gloomier picture of the future. But you're still using science and technology. So do you actually have a rosy prediction and forecast for science and technology? And Professor Kim, it seems that science and technology is supposed to make everything better, but why do we have a gloomy picture of the future? Should I start? Well, in the next 200 years, I believe that Homo sapiens will become extinct on Earth. Already, there has been five rounds of full extinction on Earth, and I think we will be the next species. I collaborate with science and technology. Well, I already believe that extinction is a sure deal. So how are we going to live on this Earth in the rest of the time in the most least painful way and die with dignity? And I think science and technology will provide us a way to do that. Well, I think predicting the future is impossible. And will people become extinct? Well, we could have a lot of different hypotheses related to that. We could have a lot of data and reasoning, and one of the most logical conclusion is as follows. If we take a look at history, we have a record of the last 1,000 or 5,000 years. But in the next 1,000, 5,000 years, will people still exist on Earth? I think we could have two answers. First, we can say that's impossible. Well, I'm not sure how to answer that. But what is for sure is that scholars talk about climate change these days, and what we know for sure is that the lifestyle that we know it as is will not be sustainable in the future. I'm not saying that we'll all be living on the sea, but the lifestyle that we know in our life today will not be possible. Well, there will be some people who are against what I say, but I would like to be the devil's advocate. Sustainability, when we talk about sustainability, I think we need to become more honest. So what this means is that talking about sustainability is quite fashionable anywhere around the world. At the Davos Forum held in Switzerland, every year, leaders from around the world discuss sustainability and climate change, and they fly on a private jet to get there. So we're talking about sustainability and climate change, and that's as fashionable as discussing Prada, Gucci, and Louis Vuitton. And to be quite frank, changing plastic straws to paper straws on Starbucks, that's not going to change the environment. And so you shouldn't be using disposables, you shouldn't be riding private jets, and I believe that we shouldn't have forums like this anymore. In the world of science, we are discussing this. Do we need international conferences? Every international conference brings together hundreds of thousands of people around the world, and they have to fly. I also fly to Europe to stay there for 2 days. That actually emits a lot of carbon. So people who are supposedly thinking about sustainability the most, but it's actually become the reason of the problem. But when we take a look into the mirror, we never think about us being the problem. We want to be the solution. But I think talking about plastic straws is just not being honest with ourselves. And if you think, if we all live in a capsule or a city on the sea or move to Mars, if that is okay, then saying that is okay could be more honest. Discussions around the world by businesses and politicians always think about maintaining the world as it is. Well, keeping the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, that's already impossible. We're all aware of that.
The background shows the carbon calendar. That's one of the artworks that the author created. It was very impressive. Of course, there are some variances across different cities. They're trying to calculate the carbon emission, trying to understand where the city stands in terms of the emission of CO2. This is very much relevant to the theme of GEEF 2023, and I wanted to do that as part of my installation work. I put in a lot of effort, but many authors, writers were saying just for 2 days of a conference, that would be such a waste of money, all the costs and efforts that have to go into this. So I had to give up on that idea in the end. So yes, I agree with you as well. We're sitting over here, but I believe that we're actually producing a lot of CO2s. Going back to your artworks, the actor Yoo Jun-yeol was very much prizing the small flower pots, and also news from nowhere. There are unknown grass that are coming to the fore. Quite romantic. And why are you so much focused on greens and grass, especially when we come to the end of the days, end of the world, where it's so difficult for us to maintain our dignity? I still believe that there should be a glimpse of hope. If you look at many sci-fis, it's dystopia where there's no food and people eat each other, and there's no dignity whatsoever on the face of the earth. But still, as humans, we have to work to preserve that spirit of humanity, to make this world a livable place, and wanted to deliver the message across. So whenever we produce these films, there are plants and there are seeds that are described precisely to give that message of hope. Actually, Mr. Chun, you made a very relevant point, because if when we're talking about sustainability, we talk about the earth, planet, environment, something that is visible to us, something that is shown to us. But on the flip side of it, what we really need to be concerned about is not something that is so visible to our eye. What we really need to focus our attention on is our inner sustainability, our sense of humanity. I don't think human civilization will just disappear. Of course, there were disasters, catastrophes, but we managed to adjust to a new environment. It's all about adaptability. Once you become so adapted, you're really not adapting yourself to the world, but the world is actually becoming your inner self, and you become a completely different human being. As a Korean myself, the Koreans, we've gone through that experience before. Of course, we have experts over here. Up until the Koryo dynasty, Koreans used to have a lot of colors, and they were very vain in some sense in terms of culture and art. But all of a sudden, the beauty of Koreans is about simplicity, it's whiteness, a sense of vacuumness. But perhaps, is that really given to us or imposed on us? It's because of the war that we had with Japan back in many centuries ago. We had to adapt ourselves to the new world. Our engineers, technicians, artists, they were abducted, and they were taken away from our land, and we were not able to develop and advance our cultures any further, and we became so accustomed to a new world, and the self that became so accustomed to that new environment, we became to actually perceive that as a new self. And that's really a sad reality, because it is actually a world of losers. In a way, this is perhaps a Stockholm phenomenon, a syndrome that we have adjusted ourselves to. And I think sustainability is actually the same concept. We're now really accustomed to a completely changed world, that real verse is completely gone. And we would just try to simulate. We would try to live on the sea. That was not an option, or that was not an inevitable choice, but we actually wanted to become that new self. And I think this sense of new being, that's to be considered, because as a human being, you really have to maintain and preserve your sense of yourself and your identity. And as long as you can do that, this visible world can be improved through technology development, by developing our economy. But once we really become accustomed to a doomed world, we can never put it back to where it used to be.
Having listened to what you have mentioned, we see the last survivor acted by Yoo Jun-yeol, and we need to take a look at this world. So he is in a metaverse, and he is not locked in there, but he believes that he's locked in and he's trying to escape. And at the same time, we have to think about, does he want to escape? If he finds someone else, will he be happier? Maybe not. Well, people these days, I don't know if I could express it in this way, but people these days want to isolate themselves. Sometimes they choose to be isolated in the metaverse. And so Professor Kim mentioned earlier on about how we need to adjust to this failing state. Well, the new generation, whenever I look at them, my children are the same. They are always looking into a screen, whether it's a computer or a phone. Well, now you will feel like you're in an older generation because you said new generation. Well, I'm not saying young people because then I don't want to be an old person. So the new generation, my kids included, are looking into the cell phone all day. And I don't say, read a book rather than looking into your phone. I never say things like that because they are nostalgic in that world. So nostalgia about their childhood. We have nostalgia about our childhood. Everyone has that. Well, I have nostalgia about playing in the forest with the winds blowing in my hair, but the nostalgia of childhood for the new generation is in the digital world. And so if we take away their screens, then it's like taking away their safe place. And so the world is changing and life is changing very quickly. So we have to understand them. And we have to think about the environment for the next generation. So we are borrowing this environment for the next generation, and so we need to preserve it for the next generation. And at the same time, we need to be able to provide a way for them to survive in their new world.
Because Tae-shi Kim, you're involved in brain science. When you go and see your pediatrician, for example, your child's brain will be very much negatively affected by being exposed to a screen for 2 hours a day. And as a parent myself, looking at my child being so stuck to his or her phone, that's very worrisome. Is that really credible from a brain scientist? Well, to be honest, especially they say that you go through a very decisive period in terms of your brain development for the first 10, 12 years, because the first 10 to 12 years, your nerve system in the brain actually explode in terms of development. For example, the nerves become strengthened, and the nerves that are really not used, they actually disappear. They actually just become extinct in a way. So what we say as brain scientists, we're not exactly sure whether it's 10 to 20 years, but for the initial decade or so for a child goes through experience, and your brain becomes optimized to that given reality. And once that child becomes an adult, that environment is usually perceived as your home, a place of home. We talk about Gen Z or Alpha, Alpha people people who are teenagers. And for the first time in human history, when their brain is at that critical stage, rather than them experiencing analog people in the world, they're actually the first Homo sapiens who have experienced digital generation, digital technology and people before analog. So, of course, internet is a place that they call home. So taking a mobile phone from your child, that's about taking away their safe haven. So that's actually could lead to issues in terms of human rights. So while I was looking at your artwork, your piece, it happened to me that let's say that Yu Jun-yeol is the last person of the humanity that's the sole survivor on the high sea. It's quite frustrating. The person is stuck in that small place in this vast expanse of a sea. How frustrating would that be? That's conditio humana. That's a basic condition of being a human in this limitless universe. We live in this small planet, small boat called the Earth that we cannot live without. And we're not even sure how we came to live here. And Yu Jun-yeol probably knows why he was there in the first place, in that boat. But we're not sure why we came to this place. For example, Gauguin's drawing, it talks about where you come from, why you are here, is questioning about your existence. So, for example, we don't know where we're headed. And we look at Yu Jun-yeol, we feel that he must have been put in a very frustrating situation, but I think we are actually placed in a very frustrating moment ourselves. And perhaps Chun Jun-ho could make his last comments.
Well, Professor Kim has mentioned this previously. So I think it's time that we stop these formal forums. So I think sustainability has become too fashionable. So what do we need to discuss now? We need to discuss how we're going to respond to this changing world. Where are we going to find food to fill our food shortage? Where are we going to build seawalls to keep our land free of flooding? So if we have any future forums, let's not talk about sustainability. Let's talk about something that is possible. That's what I hope to see. Well, we are ending on a negative note on this forum, it seems. We are ending on a note that it is a waste, but despite so, we need to gather our hearts together to imagine a better future. And if we imagine together, maybe it will become a reality. Thank you very much. Thank you for your participation, both offline and online. Thank you very much to the two gentlemen who have joined us. Thank you very much.
That was fascinating. Thank you for a glimpse into the artistic world. Our next session will be on arts as well. We want to welcome you back for the next featured session on contemporary artists building an ecologically sustainable community. And we think that will happen soon at around 13:25.